All right. I have 7 o'clock on my clock here, so we will call the meeting to order. I don't know if you can see over my shoulder over here, we have a small American flag. So, and there's one there in that corner thing as well. But if you can, where you are, if you can rise for the pledge, go ahead. If you can't, because of your logistics, don't worry about that. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
nation,
one nation under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty and
justice for all.
Hey, just before we do the roll call, let me just, since this is an unusual setup for us, just a couple of logistical things. Since we want to maintain as much as we can the spirit of the Open Meetings Act on this, let's make sure that everybody gets a chance to be heard. And if we have more than one person talking at a time, we're going to step on each other. So, I think I can see everybody on the screen. So just let me know if you want to speak, and I'll make sure that we can kind of clear it for you. And then just in case we have any voting issues, and I know a couple of you have muted, when I ask for a yes or no vote, if you want to do that verbally, that's good. But if you could also do maybe a thumbs up or a thumbs down, that way, if there is any audio issues, I make sure that I see what vote you're giving. So if you could do it both verbally and with a hand signal. And then just again, in the spirit of the Open Meetings Act, in Zoom, there is a feature for you to chat. If you type anything, make sure that you are not doing it as a private message to just one other person in the group, but do it so it's a public comment that whatever you type, everybody that's on the meeting is going to be able to see what you type there. So, and that way, I think we'll make sure that we at least maintain the spirit of that Open Meetings Act. So, roll call. Mr. Bray.
Here.
Mrs. Brimmer is excused. She is not able to attend tonight. She asked to be excused. Mr. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Hall?
Here.
Okay. Mr. McGrath?
Here.
Mr. Nixon? Rebecca, have you heard anything from him? Do you know? Okay.
I have not.
So we'll mark him absent. Mr. Harrison Owens?
Here.
Mr. Watson?
Here.
Craig Owens is here. I know I see our city clerk, Mr. Womack, and our clerk, Rebecca Johnson. Is Tim Johnson, did he join us this evening?
Okay. I indicated to Mr. Johnson that his services were not required at this meeting.
Okay, so there's our representation today from the city. All right, so if you can remember all the way back to March 3rd, we need a motion to approve the minutes of our March 3rd meeting.
I will make that motion.
I will second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have support. Anybody have anything on those minutes that you see that needs to be addressed? Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Okay, motion carries. Those minutes are approved. And our agenda for this evening is pretty simple, straightforward. I'll make the motion that we approve the agenda as it's been presented in our packet.
Mr. Owens, just before
Yes.
we move on, could I just make a minor point? Do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and then also, Ms. Johnson, do you want to simply jump in if you need clarification, or how do you want to do it? Because on that last motion, I heard 3 or 4 different people attempt to make the motion in second.
I have Mr. Conley as making the motion and Mr. McGrath is seconding.
Okay, I mean, you know what you're doing, so if you don't feel comfortable, please make sure to jump in and we'll make sure to clarify, okay?
Sure.
All right, so I made the motion for the approval of the agenda. Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Okay. Anybody see anything that needs to be addressed or clarified on that agenda? Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda as we have in our packet? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Okay. Motion passed. The agenda is approved. Public comments. Ms. Johnson, do we have anybody?
Looks like there's one person that may be available for public comment. If
Okay.
that person would like to unmute themselves, if they would like to make a comment at this time. One last chance. Is there any other public comment?
We have one person here for a comment.
So nobody online for public comment at this time, Mr. Owens.
Okay, so seeing no public comments, we'll close that.
There's
Folks,
one from the city hall, it looks like.
oh, okay.
We do have two members of the public who are present, but I don't think either one of them wishes to make a comment at this time. I'm saying a no and a no.
All right. Planning Commission members, any reports of conflicts of interest or ex parte communication on our items? Okay, seeing none. Item number 8, our scheduled public hearing. I will open that public hearing to discuss the amending of Chapter 4, Article 1, Section 40-5. Specifically, we're looking at the codes and the ordinances as it would relate to the various marijuana businesses. I believe in your packet, the verbiage of kind of the definitions that we've laid out so far start on page 13, I believe, if I have that correct, that number there correct.
You are correct.
Okay, so since this is a scheduled public hearing, we'd like for either those that are online or they're at City Hall that would like to address us on this, if you would like to do so. Let's go with first anybody who's online with this meeting that would like to address this. We'll give you the first option.
So there's one person from the public online. I'm going to go ahead and unmute that person. If they'd like to make a comment, please do so at this time.
Right. Just scroll down and click that button right there.
All right, one more moment, and this will be the last chance for public comment for the public hearing for the marijuana ordinance. All right, no public comments online.
Okay. All right. Are there any public comments from citizens that are in the City Hall chambers?
No comments here.
Okay. All right. So then we will close this public hearing and we'll move to new business to look at the items that have been presented to us. I trust that you had a chance to go through and get to your quiz that Mr. Womack gave us with those questions on there. My thought on this, folks, is that I would like to make sure that we have as much opportunity for people to weigh in on this as possible. And so what I would like to do tonight is go through these questions that Mr. Womack has given us and give a sense of what we feel as we answer these things, and then allow him to kind of craft something for us that we can make available to the public. And then we hope that for our June meeting that we would be able to meet together and have a conversation and invite as many of the public as possible that would like to weigh in on this. So what I'd like to do, I think Mr. Womack's letter that starts, says regarding marijuana zoning restriction proposals, and then it's a kind of a draft and some oversight or some overview that he gave us. I believe it starts on page 32 in your packet. And then just a couple of pages into that would be where it says quiz time as the heading, and it starts with those questions there. So if we could just kind of work our way through those, the 13 yes or no questions, and then question 14 is kind of a little bit open-ended. Rebecca, did you get, because Mrs. Bremer couldn't make it tonight, she sent me a copy of, I can't tell whether she actually, if she emailed this over to City Hall or not. Maybe Mr. Womack got it. It was her answers, and I don't know if we can.
I did not get a copy of it. Mike, did you get a copy?
I think I did, but let me jump in with just two things. First of all, I want to agree with Mr. Owens that I don't think it's appropriate for the Planning Commission to make a recommendation of the City Council at this time. And of course, out of an abundance of caution with the Zoom meetings and whatnot, we are trying to give the public as many opportunities as possible to weigh in on this. So what I've asked the Planning Commission to consider doing is discuss, what we're discussing today, and then at their June meeting, actually make the recommendation to City Council at that time. The second thing I would point out is that for any members of the public who are watching us, and of course, the Planning Commission members, City Council members, they all know this. This discussion isn't necessarily about the individual beliefs of the Planning Commission members themselves. I've spoken with, just about every single person on the Planning Commission and the City Council about this. And there is a divide between what they may themselves want for themselves personally, but this job requires them to look at what's best for the community overall. And so sometimes those intersect, sometimes those align, but they're not necessarily the case in every instance. So I just don't want the members of the public thinking that simply because a Planning Commission member or a City Council member were to vote one way or the other on any of these particular questions, that is their personal belief. That's not necessarily the case. It's probably more likely that the Planning Commission member or the City Council member is making a decision or a vote based on what they think is best overall for the community. Regarding Ms. Bremer, I don't know if it's appropriate to take what she may have emailed as a vote one way or the other. It may be worth discussing any discussion points she included, but I made it explicitly clear that when I sent this out, this is simply a kind of a guide for a yes and no situation. What you may have written down and emailed to me is not your answer, in my opinion, because the discussion we're going to have right now in front of the public, as all meetings should be, you can change your mind. And I don't know if Ms. Bremer would have changed her mind one way or the other on any of the answers she would have given tonight. So I simply don't think it's appropriate to count somebody's answers who's not here with us at the meeting as part of the quorum. So I would ask that only the answers given tonight, verbally or a thumbs up or a thumbs down, would count towards that vote.
I agree. All right. So with that in mind, let's just dive right into this thing. And again, as I said earlier, if there's any thing that you would like to, in our packet that you'd like to see, we can share that on the screen. So I know that there's some, in our packet, there were some maps that will have the area where the exclusion zone is and the, the 500-foot markers and that sort of thing. Anytime that you'd like to see something like that, or if you want a clarification on what exactly does this question mean, just make sure that you just let me know so we get a chance for you to ask that question or get that clarification or ask for the item on the screen. I'm not looking to race through these things. I just want to make sure that you can have an opportunity to weigh in on it. So but question number one, all the, like I said, these first 13 are just simply a yes or no, and then we can add some discussion to it. But let's just start off with that yes or no. Should the city add the R3 zoning district to the 500-foot exclusionary zone for growers, process, and excess growers. So let's just do like this, and give me a chance to count them. If you are yes, do a thumbs up. If you're no, do a thumbs down, and just give me a second to do kind of a quick tally on that, if you would. So question number one, if you are a yes, let's do that one first. Do the thumbs up for yes.
Mr. Owens, do you want to discuss these at the same time or prior to voting on them?
Well, I guess I wanted to get a sense first if we were kind of divided, then we could have a discussion. If, if everybody was saying yes, then, or yes or no, then, there wasn't really a reason to discuss it any further. That was my thought.
Well, I'm fearful that even if one person feels contrary, that they should be able to express a minority opinion and try to convince the majority.
For sure.
And then also, Ms. Johnson, do you feel that that is sufficient under the executive order for the roll call vote?
I think that each person should be called on and made their vote verbally. If you could do that.
Okay. Well, let's do verbally and a signal too, if just in case there's an audio issue, we'll have that verification. So, all right. Any discussion on question number one?
I guess my biggest concern is the 500-foot exclusion and where it would be located. Having something near the brook home and near family residences is a big concern, in my opinion.
So, Mr. Womack, I think it's like page 30, 31 is that map that you have with the exclusionary area. Can you pull that up on your screen? And
Yep. So I've got my share screen on. Can anybody see that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
yes. Okay. So, Mr. Bray, does that help you with that?
Well, yeah, I've looked at the map, but it's still a concern of how close that is to potentially the brook home and even future family residences, in my opinion. I don't think it should be that close.
So are you advocating that that 500-foot figure be expanded?
Yeah, at least 1,000, if not even more. I guess 1,000 feet's, that's not even a quarter of a mile.
If I could just jump in for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason this question is on here, originally when I look at the map, and of course I can put these maps together showing the exclusionary zones, is that the R1, R2, and mixed use districts basically excluded a majority of the industrial section of downtown from growers and processors. So there's no need to include the R3 district at that time. However, when I looked at what we normally refer to as the HC district, the area up on the expressway, the brook is R3. And we have had developers interested in putting multifamily residential in the properties that surround the brook area. So if we were to add the R3, it would have zero effect downtown, including whether we increased it from 500 to 1,000, which I think is unnecessary. But if we were to add R3, it would create that exclusionary zone that you see there, which surrounds the brook area currently. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. What is all of the R3?
Can you guys see the zoning map now on your screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the R3 is kind of this goldish color right here. And you're going to see that the only R3 zones that exist are the area at the end of Oak Street where the apartment complexes are. This little section next to where the car wash is on South Street in Maine, and then Prairie Run North and the Brook, okay? And so if you think about it, the R3 where the apartment complex is completely surrounded by residential. No marijuana business is allowed there anyways. The R3 that's Prairie Run North is completely surrounded by residential. There's no marijuana businesses allowed in residential. The R3 where the car wash is surrounded by the school district. And there's no marijuana businesses allowed within 1,000 feet of the school district. So that really leaves just the Brook. I guess there's a little section on Cherry Street, but that entire area is within the 500-foot exclusionary zone of the R1 mixed use district. I know it's complicated, but it really only affects the Brook and the area surrounding the Brook. So if we add the R3 to the 500-foot exclusionary zone, you take that area around the Brook and you reserve it for non-marijuana businesses. That would be the practical effect of voting yes on this question.
Okay. Mr. Bray, does that help you? Or do you still like the 500 number?
Well, I guess if everything around the brook is also excluded, does that include everything going up to the line there by Creative CTA? Or would it just be right around the brook? That would be,
Well, 500 feet.
There'd be 1,000 feet there.
but they can't be within 500 feet of the school. What about within the brook area? How far away from the brook? Basically, I don't like it to be near residential, near the schools. Out by highway, commercial's fine, but to be.
So, sorry to interrupt. To answer your question, all marijuana businesses have to be 1,000 feet from all schools. Okay. So I do have a map in here showing the 1,000 feet from schools. Sorry, I've got like 7 windows open on my computer. Okay, can you guys see that map?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you'll see the red area. That is 1,000 feet from CTA. And so you'll see that it only intersects the properties that are to the east of the brook, right? Okay, so now if you go back to the map that would add the 500 feet separation from R3, you see that these properties, the ones outlined in blue, are the properties that would now be excluded under that additional exclusion.
You got a couple little slivers there on each side that potentially could be. Looks like.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Right. If you look at that
Yeah.
1,000 feet from the school, that really kind of touches, if not overlaps, the 500 feet around the brook.
And you also have to remember that the Planning Commission also is in strong control of the HC district, the properties that can be brought in from Solon Township under the 425. So the Planning Commission is in a strong position, I mean, obviously now, to set out the ground rules, but later on, if someone were to attempt to bring in something through the 425, we're in a very strong position at that point also to deny it simply under the 425. But I think this makes a common sense inclusion so that these 2 L-shaped properties are reserved for multi-family residential. And of course, this property right here, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse.
Yes.
But this property right here is where the sheriff's department is going to go.
All right, any other thoughts on question number 1 or questions? All right, so let me run down.
Mr.
the li-
Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Hall wanted to speak.
Okay.
If we look at the map, our 500-foot exclusion overlaps the 1,000-foot buffer for the school to the east. So this 500-foot exclusion would definitely not allow anything to go between the school and the residential at all, except that little narrow strip on White Creek in Pine or Solon Road.
Okay. All right. So let's do, any other questions, comments on that? All right, so Rebecca, if you're ready, I'm going to run through the names, and so I'm going to ask for a yes or no, what you think on question number 1. Mr. Bray,
Yes.
Mr. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Hall. He's some thumbs up, yes. Mr. McGrath,
Yes.
Harrison Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Craig Owens votes yes as well. So I think we're unanimous on that. All right, question number 2. Should the city allow marijuana retailers to operate in the B2 district?
So, Mr. Owens, if I could just give at the beginning of each question, just a brief overview of why I'm asking.
Yes.
So, the retailer business is going to be the most visible. It's going to be the most sought after business license. For lack of a better word, I think it's the sexy business that people want to be involved in. And under my original draft, the marijuana retailers were only permitted in the B2 and B3 districts, which would be this pink area in the middle downtown north of Ash Street, because south of Ash Street is within the school exclusion zone. And then along Main Street, this kind of dark purplish area up to 18 Mile Road. That would be the only area in the city that a marijuana retailer store would be permitted under the current draft. So eventually we're going to get to a point where we're going to talk about the HC district, which is this light purple area out here by the 131 Expressway. But I figured I would provide the Planning Commission with the opportunity right now to decide whether they think it's appropriate to remain allowing retailers in the downtown B2 district, which is this area from Ash Street to Maple Street along Main Street.
Planning Commissioners, any discussion on that?
I guess I would like to have it more downtown than out at the highway commercial, simply because we need to get more businesses downtown. I guess if a business wanted to come to Cedar Springs that bad, they would go downtown if that's the only place that was allowed.
I agree. The keeping it allowed downtown just makes sense logically, because like he said, it brings more business downtown. So I see it as a positive just to keep it there, keep allowing it there.
Any other discussion? Okay. So let's vote on number 2. Again, we're doing a yes or no. Mr. Bray,
Yes or no to what part, I guess?
should the city allow marijuana retailers to operate in the B2 district?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Hall? He says yes. Okay, got that. Mr.
Yes.
McGrath,
Yes.
Harrison Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Owens votes no. All right. Question number 3, should the city allow marijuana retailers to operate in the B3 district? That's that area up there, kind of that darker maroon that's on the map that you have up right now.
So just to jump in again, under the current draft, we would allow marijuana retailers to operate in the B3 district, as Mr. Owens pointed out, is the kind of dark maroon color. I would point out, as the Planning Commission is aware, earlier this year, we redrafted the zoning map, and we converted some properties that had previously been B1 properties, and we changed those to B3. Now, this area on South Main Street, which is near to where the car wash is located entirely within the 1,000-foot exclusionary zone of the school. So marijuana businesses would not be permitted there. And then likewise, I believe these 2 properties, which are currently Rollins and the Dirt Lot, I believe those are both also in the exclusionary zone. Now, I'm not entirely sure about this piece, which is currently a hair salon. I don't know if that's within the 1,000-foot exclusionary zone. Although I do believe that that property is next to a single-family residential use. And if that is the case, later on in this discussion, we may decide to prohibit any marijuana business from operating next to a single-family residential use. So if the Planning Commission wanted to prohibit it there, you could address that at that time. So really, we're only talking about this area from Maple Street to 18 Mile on both sides of Main Street.
Any discussion, thoughts on the B3? Okay, looks like we're ready to vote on this. Mr. Bray,
Yes.
Mr. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. McGrath,
Yes.
Harrison Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Owens votes no. All right, question number 4. Should the city allow marijuana retailers to operate in the highway commercial district?
So this is the area that's around the 131. Here it's a light purple color. Currently, under the current draft, it is not permitted. Marijuana retailers are not permitted. However, there is significant interest in allowing marijuana retailers to operate in this district, both by citizens and marijuana businesses themselves. Now, I will indicate also that there are a number of kind of controls that the Planning Commission can recommend if they choose now to allow retailers to operate in that district. So there are some additional measures that we'll be talking about that will further restrict how we allow them to operate in that district. But this, I guess, is a preliminary matter to that discussion.
Okay. Any comments, questions on question number 4 in the HC district?
I've I'm generally in favor of being able to have them there. I do think that at a later date, we should definitely talk about size and scale of the operations that will allow in that area, because I think that at a certain point it could be kind of not fitting in the, you know, the sort of culture of the area if they got too big.
Just for clarification purposes, we are talking just retailers, not the growers or processors right now, correct?
Right, retailers. Question number 4 is retailers.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yep. Okay, ready to vote? Mr. Bray,
No.
Mr. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yeah.
did I lose him? Where'd he go? Oh, there you go. One more time, Mr. Hall. Did you say yes or no?
Mr. Hall indicated yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. McGrath,
No.
Mr. Harrison Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
No.
Mr. Owens votes yes. All right. Question number 5. Should the city allow marijuana micro businesses to operate in the B3 district?
So again, we're talking about the purple area from Maple Street north to 18 Mile Road along Main Street. All other areas, I believe, would be prohibited for various other reasons. So retailers are simply a storefront where you can purchase it like any other retail environment. A micro business would be similar to, say, a microbrewery, where the business would be required to grow the marijuana, process the marijuana, and then sell the marijuana all at one location. So it would require a larger building and might cause other issues, such as having potential odors or something emanating from the building, although that is prohibited. And so I felt originally in the original draft that the B2 downtown district, it just wouldn't make sense because there's no potential building that could work in the downtown. But there are a number of kind of pole barn style buildings on the northern side of downtown, the B3 district, which might work. Of course, there are going to be a number of exclusions, which I think a significant portion of the district would not be open and available for this. But currently it is permitted, and I felt that the Planning Commission should be able to weigh in.
Comments, discussion on that? Okay. Mr. Bray,
Yes.
Mr. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
No.
Mr. McGrath,
Yes.
Harrison Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Owens votes no. Question number 6. Same type of question. Should the city allow marijuana micro businesses, but this time in the HC district? So back out there to the left side of your screen, that the purple color out there.
So I agree, similar idea, but I would point out maybe something the board members might want to have in mind. And that is that what we're talking about is a business that is limited to 150 plants maximum. That's all that would be permitted for growth, processing, and sale at a micro business in the HC district. Now, there is the potential of allowing for a growing operation, a processing operation, and a retail operation all to co-locate on one property. And the reason that's important is because what you could be setting up and maybe we don't care because this could be a capitalism decision, not a planning commission decision, is that you're going to say, okay, microbusiness, with your 150 plants, you now have to face off against a grower, processor, retailer who could have 2,000 plants, 4,000 plants. And it may just make it an impossible environment for a microbusiness to really thrive. On the other hand, you could say go ahead and it just never will happen because it doesn't make financial sense.
Any comments or discussion on that question number 6?
Just for clarification purposes, we are talking retailer, grower, and processor, correct?
The micro business, so they do it all.
Yep, okay.
I think that we should allow it. I think, as Mr. Womack indicated, even if it becomes a capitalist issue where they just can't do it because it's not financially viable, I don't think that that is up to us to decide. I think that it should be allowable, and if they think it makes sense for them as a business, then they should, they can go ahead with that.
If it's okay.
Yes.
I see the possibility of using the micro business as a carrot. If it's allowed in the B3, that brings business downtown. If you then don't allow a similar kind of business in the HC, this is, if they want to have that kind of business, they essentially have to put it into that B3 area.
I agree with that comment. I think that if we wanted to get the retail and the micro business downtown, we can't allow a micro business out at the highway commercial. It just will eliminate the need for people to bring it downtown.
I mean, I think that we could solve the issue of it eliminating the need to bring it downtown by adding in various rules about how closely the businesses can be located. So if we had something in there like that, that would only leave so much space in the highway commercial. And then if more businesses wanted to come in, they could also, then that would sort of force them into that area if there was not anywhere else they could go.
I have a question.
Yes.
Right now, our entire highway commercial is essentially 425 that didn't originate inside the city, but then was brought into the city later. So essentially, our 425, our RHC district could get much larger over the next few years if simply we allowed more businesses in on land that's that is not at the moment associated with the city. So it doesn't seem to me that there's much of a limit on how big the HC district can get as long as we allow it.
Yep. Okay. Any other discussion, comments on this question number 6? All right. Mr. Bray.
No.
Mr. Conley.
No.
Mr. Hall.
No.
Mr. McGrath.
No.
Harrison Owens.
Yes.
Mr. Watson.
No.
Mr. Owens votes no. All right. So for question 7 and 8, please note the comment that Mr. Womack put on here for these 2 questions for 7 and 8. As we discuss these, keep in mind that marijuana businesses may locate on the same property as any residential use.
No marijuana business
Right,
may
no.
locate.
Right, that's what I said, sorry. So, question number 7. We're going back to that B3 district. Mr. Womack touched on this earlier, prohibiting the sharing of a property line with a single family use. So like you pointed out that example of where the hair salon is, that is a B3, but it shares a property line with a residential. That would be, an example. So.
And if I could just point out, so the majority of these property lines are in the B3 district, where a potential marijuana business could share a property line with a single family residential use. But there are some places in the downtown B2 district that this might also affect. And of course, we will then address question 8, where if you vote no for the B3 district only, you may be voting to extend it to all zoning districts.
Right. So, right. So just to clarify on question number 7, we're just doing B3. So if you say that that's the only spot that you want that to be prohibited, then we're not even going to address question number 8, correct?
I guess theoretically, people could all vote for yes on B3 and then yes also on 8.
Correct.
Which of course 8 would then subsume B3.
Right.
But I'll leave it to the chair how he wants to ask the question and then interpret the results.
Okay. All right. Any questions or comments on this one?
I have a question for Mr. Womack. Is if we say yes, is this going to eliminate a large portion of B3? I mean, I'm looking at the map right now. It seems like a lot of B3 would be eliminated if we say yes to this.
So, of course, I don't know what you want to define as a large portion. I did send out an email previously to the planning commission members, just showing where I personally identified as locations where this would affect the potential location of a marijuana business. In particular, we're talking about this area along Main Street, immediately north of Maple Street, and then also immediately north of Oak Street. There are some single-family residential uses in this area. There's also single-family residential uses that are immediately to the west of the car dealership, which is located on the southwest corner of Pine and Main. And then I believe there's also a single-family residential that is on the west side of Main. I think it's between the Vanderhyde and the medical center that's up there. And I should point out, I indicate single-family residential use, not single-family residential zoning, because of course North Park exists as R1 single-family residential zoning, but it will never be used, as far as I know, for any single-family residential use. And of course, the area that is bounded by Needlewood over here does not share a common boundary because of the White Pine Trail. So yes, it will eliminate some portions, but I don't think all portions.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
I have one more question about that related to number 8. How would that change if the city prohibited, like in question 8 says, all property lines with a single family residential primary use in all zoning districts? How would that limit businesses?
So this would really only affect the B2 and B3 districts downtown, because obviously there is no residential out there in the HC district. I'll be completely honest, and I did not do as close of an analysis of the downtown B2 district as I did in the B3 district. So I guess that's my homework between now and your June meeting. If you want me to take a much closer look at the B2 district and see how it might affect, because I do know that there are some locations that do share borders with single-family residential. For example, would be right here on Ash Street, west of Main Street. There is a single-family residential home. I don't know if it shares common border with any of these storefronts at front on Main, because the property that it's closest to is a grass lot, which I guess no marijuana business could build there, because obviously it would be sharing a property line with that home. But I do not have a list of other places in the B2 district that it would affect.
Okay. So again, on question number 7, what we're voting on is we're saying, do we want this to be this prohibiting of businesses that share a property line with residential? Are we just concerned with B3 is what we're voting on in number 7. Number 8 is then, do we want to expand that same prohibition to another zone, or the B2 really is?
Mr. Owens, if I could make a minor amendment. So under question 7, I think if we eliminate the word only at the very end of the question.
Okay.
And have the board members send out the word only, so they can now vote to prohibit property line sharing in the B3 district. And then as a separate question, they can also vote to extend that to all zoning districts.
Okay.
Should the number 8 question fail, you would keep that prohibition in the B3 district intact. Does that make sense?
Yes. So the word only is in there twice. Are you proposing to remove it twice? It's at the beginning of the question and then also the last word?
Yeah, I guess that would be required, but
Okay.
I guess my question to the board, does anybody have questions about that change, or does everybody understand what I'm proposing?
I think that makes it a little bit clearer to.
Mhm.
Okay, so you understand then how we're changing the question. Should the city prohibit marijuana businesses from sharing a property line with a single family residential primary use in the B3 district? So yes, they should prohibit that in the B3 district, or no, it shouldn't be prohibited in the B3 district is what we're voting on this one. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So Mr. Bray,
Yes.
Mr. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yeah.
Mr. McGrath,
Yes.
Harrison Owens,
Yeah.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Owens votes yes. All right. So then let's, for question number 8, then now we're just saying, should the city prohibit marijuana businesses from sharing a property line with single family residential in the other zoning districts? As Mr. Womack pointed out, essentially we're just talking about B2. But I don't think that there is highway commercial. We have no residential out there at all. So we'll be touching that. Okay. So
I have a question.
yes.
In the B, if we're looking at the B2, would this sharing a property line include those buildings that have apartments above them?
So the way I have the current draft written is that no marijuana business can share a property with a residential use of any kind. So if you are a retail store with apartments above, you cannot have a marijuana business on that property. However, the way this question is written, single family residential primary use. So for example, if you were a retail store and you do not have apartments up above you, but your next door neighbor does, that would not prohibit you because your next door neighbor's residential is accessory use, not primary use. And it's not single family residential, it's multifamily residential.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this question number 8?
I guess my only other comment is the fact that until we get a real good idea of which lots are single family in the B2, this is kind of irrelevant. I mean, we can give an answer, but it's not going to be 100% accurate till we know
Right.
for sure.
Right, and that's, basically what we're doing with our yes and no votes tonight is to allow Mr. Womack to go back and kind of put together a draft for us to discuss in our June meeting. And so then by that time, we would have a better idea and we could reverse our decision based on what kind of research, we get back and find out which properties we are talking about. So tonight's yes or no votes on these things are just really to kind of give some direction for the getting closer to a final draft.
Okay.
I would point out just one additional thing, and that is, to a certain extent, this question, more than any other question, I think, is also just a moral question for here in the city, because we also don't know what might happen in the HC district in the future. We may have a single family residential development out there. And we could be saying right now, it doesn't matter what happens in the future. We here in the city are saying that if you are a single family residential home, you are saved from having a marijuana business be next to you, regardless of where you are in the city. Now, I do understand that there are implications for the B2 district, which of course I'll put together that information probably tomorrow. But I just want to point out that that is a way to look at it, simply as a moral statement of where we are as a city.
Then we should almost have a comment on every single zone on whether we would want it potentially.
Well, we kind of have that already insofar as the table of uses only allows single family residential, in future development in certain places. There is no single family residential permitted in the HC district under the table of uses. And of course, in the B2, B3 district, there are restrictions on it, and the marijuana businesses are prohibited from residential districts, zoning districts themselves. So I suspect it would have very little impact outside the B2 district. But you're right, at this time I don't have that information, so I'll provide that as soon as I can.
Okay, so what is the feeling then for, do we want to, at this point, do we want to do just all zoning districts for this question, or do we want to, you want to just limit it and just say B2 and we can address the other one down the road, or what are your thoughts?
I'm in favor of all zoning districts.
I agree.
So we'll leave the word all in there for now, and then we can address it again once we get the draft and some more information. All right. Any other comments or questions on this before we vote on this one? Okay. So question number 8, should the city prohibit marijuana businesses from sharing a property line with any single family residential primary use in all zoning districts? Mr. Bray.
Yes.
Mr. Conley.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yeah.
Mr. McGrath.
Yes.
Harrison Owens.
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Owens votes yes. All right, question number 9. Should the city allow marijuana retailers, we're talking about retailers here, marijuana retailers to co-locate on the same property as a grower, processor, excess grower in the HC district? So we're talking about retailers in the HC district and their co-location.
So just a couple points. First of all, currently, under the current draft, marijuana retailers are not permitted in the HC district at all. I believe the previous vote was 4-3 to allow them. But what this question is asking is that there are marijuana businesses that would like to grow the marijuana, process the marijuana, and then sell it at a retail store on one property. I guess I don't see any problem with that. But the problem that I think we could foresee is if we don't allow this, we are saying that the HC district, which is primarily a commercial district, would allow these growers, processors, which are essentially industrial uses, to take a building over, and they would only be allowed to use that building for industrial purposes in a commercial district. If we vote to allow them to co-locate a retailer at that grower processor building, now you're saying, well, you have the option to include a retailer at your grower processor, which I suspect most will want to do. Now, there is a question later on, which I'd like to add under 14, which I think will put a sharper point on this.
Yeah.
But for the time being, I guess I'm curious whether the board is in favor of allowing a grower processor to add a store also, which would keep that property open to the public.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, can I comment on this?
Yes.
And at the danger of possibly jumping outside of the scope of this question, because I know this is going to touch on some of the other questions coming forward. I'm looking at this in the way I'm looking at it is a smaller, like maybe the under 40,000 foot that comes up later, a smaller grower, retailer, do-it-all facility might be okay in the highway commercial. My concern is a big box, Walmart sized kind of place that is the biggest business in Cedar Springs, right up next to the highway, that tends to define us as the first thing people see. It's the biggest landmark in town. That's the kind of thing that I would like to avoid. I don't mind using the commercial district for commercial purposes. I don't mind having a storefront, and I don't necessarily mind the concept of an all-in-one, but I'm not thrilled with the idea of having a giant thing out there dominating the landscape.
Okay.
If I may add to that, we already talked about micro businesses and whether or not we would allow them in the highway district. And personally, this feels like a very similar question, just a different size, different scope. And I personally I just wouldn't allow it because we're trying to bring business downtown, and this would just be putting business out near the highway, and that would just defeat the purpose of the earlier question.
So as I indicated before, I was planning on adding a question 14, which I had sent to all of you previously by email, but I'll mention it now just so it's in your mind. And that is under question 14, I would propose that if we were to allow retail stores to locate in the HC district, that we would not allow them to be a standalone retail store, but that we would require they co-locate with a grower processor. And I think that might help prevent 30 or 40, standalone mom and pop marijuana retail stores from attempting to open up in the HC district, and instead force them, if they want to be a standalone retail store, to locate in the B2 or B3 district. So that would be my proposed question number 14. Don't want to address it this time, but I did want you to think about it while you're thinking about this question.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions on number 9? Before we vote on that. Okay. All right. Mr. Bray,
No.
Mr. Conley,
A qualified no. I'd like to vote for this later after we talked about other stuff, but for now, a no.
okay. Mr. Hall,
No.
Mr. McGrath,
No.
Harrison Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
No.
Mr. Owens votes no. All right, question number 10. Should the city increase from 100 feet to 500 feet the separation distance between micro businesses in the I-1? That's the kind of gray there that's up on your map right now. The I-1 district from all properties in the R1, R2. Do we still have an MU? Thought we got rid of the MU, but
The mixed use district is still red on the map.
oh, okay. So we're increasing from 100 feet to 500 feet the distance between micro businesses in the I-1 and properties in R1, R2, and MU.
So just to discuss this for a second, similar to previous questions, the growers and processors, due to their 500-foot separation from R1, R2, and mixed use, and I believe you guys voted to add R3, this whole section of downtown gray I-1 properties are completely prohibited from growers and processors. What I'm asking in this question is, if we're going to allow the micro businesses into the I-1 district, which makes sense, should we increase from 100 feet to 500 feet their separation from R1, R2, and mixed use? And I would assume R3, although that has no real practical effect. So let me just zoom in for half a second and you'll maybe get a better understanding of why this question is brought up. So I did do some separation distance kind of looking at, and I noticed that here on Ash Street, the west end where the dead end goes into the White Pine Trail, there might be 1 or 2 places there which are 100 feet from any residential use that might be able to host a micro business. Now, if we were to increase that to 500 feet, the micro businesses would likewise be prohibited from the downtown industrial section, and instead they would be cast out with the growers and processors to this section of town, which is 16 Mile and White Creek Avenue. And then also based on previous questions asked, whether they'd be allowed in the HC district and the B3 district. But so that's the essential question here is on Ash Street, they're not bordering upon a single family residential use or any kind of residential use. There's a couple pockets here and there. And I didn't know if the planning commission wanted to allow a micro business to potentially be in that area.
Questions, comments on that?
I think if our stated goal is to try and bring more businesses into the downtown area, I don't see why we should try to eliminate these few spots where a business could potentially go, especially since they're not going to be, you know, bordering up against any residential properties or anything like that.
Any other thoughts, questions?
Are we voting on 100 feet or 500 feet?
Well, so we're saying, if we say yes, we're saying yes to increase it to 500 feet. It's currently 100 feet. So a yes would increase it to 500 feet and no would keep it where it is at 100 feet.
Thank you.
But this for sure would not still butt up against any single family residences.
So the way I have it written is R1, R2, and mixed use. As I indicated before, I don't think there is, well, I take that back. Along Cherry Street, there is some R3, which, you know, the area, the industrial area there is all CS manufacturing. I don't think they're going to convert to marijuana. But we could also add R3 because I don't think that would affect the area I'm talking about. I could put together a better map or show addresses where I think this, where single family residential use is in this district, if it would help. I'm really thinking about the west end of Ash Street, which is a little industrial, you know, section of the city. Of course, you guys could table this if you want. But, you know, we're going to come back and look at this again. So maybe a vote indicating your preferences, and then you can reevaluate at the June meeting.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yes.
We just voted to put a 500-foot exclusion zone around R3. Wouldn't that eliminate a lot of that I-1 district because of that?
You're right, it might, because of course that corner of Fifth and Cherry is R3 right there.
Right.
I don't know if it extends all the way over to Ash Street. I'd have to get out my compass and you know, string, but that's something I can put together for your next meeting. But as far as this question is concerned, you know, I'd have to look at the word interplay to see how that works out. Yeah, of course, we'll do our best to make sure that the language matches what you guys want to do. But that's really what I'm asking here is what does this board want to do? And you know, maybe this minor problem we could work around between now and June. But what does the board want to do? Does the board want to allow potentially having a micro business in that kind of Ash Street corridor or not?
Well, like, here's my other question. Would that section of Ash Street, wouldn't that also be part of the overlay that we're talking about?
Yes, but I figured we would address that during the overlay portion.
Of course. It's just we'll be coming at it from, you know, slightly different directions. That's why I was wanting to. I'm not saying that we should delay it till the overlay. Just recognize that it's also part of that. So I was kind of thinking along the lines of what do we want and not want in the overlay might also have some bearing on this.
Well, and that's a good point. Thank you. Because the same buildings that I've identified on Ash Street that might work for this type of business with the overlay could be converted to something that is a little less pothead friendly. Some of the things that we've previously discussed would be a bicycle repair shop or an ice cream store. Because of course this little section of town borders along the White Pine Trail,
Right.
which might be a good benefit to the users of that trail, which may be turned off by marijuana business being there.
And I'm torn on this myself for that reason, between let them do it because of the type of zoning that it is, versus do we want to have it right next to the trail for a public image issue? And I can't come to a conclusion at the moment.
Any other thoughts or questions on number 10 before we vote on this one? So again, what we're doing on this one, if you're the buffer right now, the separation distance already is 100 feet. So if you vote yes on this one, you're voting to increase that 100 feet to 500 feet. If you vote no, then you're just saying that we're going to keep it at the 100 feet where it currently is.
And I would add just one thing, and that is, not to give everybody an out on this question, but you are not voting on a resolution, you're not voting on a site plan, you're not voting on an ordinance. The only thing that you guys are voting on right now is to provide me guidance,
right,
for how to bring back a draft to you for next time. So if you truly don't know how you want to vote on this, I have no problems with you abstaining. Only that your voice would obviously not be counted between now and the time that the new draft comes out.
Right, right. Okay, Mr. Bray?
Yeah, this is when I'm kind of up on the air, but at this point, I'm going to say no.
Okay, Mr. Conley?
I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Hall?
No. 100 feet.
Mr. McGrath?
Yes.
Harrison Owens? Wait, I didn't hear you. Harrison?
No.
Okay, no, okay. Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Mr. Owens votes yes.
Thank you for the three, and one vote.
I think city council should know that we're kind of on the fence on this. That nothing sells it better than that.
All right, question number 11. Should the city exclude growers and processors from the HC district? So again, we're talking about the kind of the purple part on your map that's out there to the west. And we're talking about growers and processors specifically for this one.
So as you guys have all identified, this question kind of interplays with a number of the other questions we've already asked. In the current draft of the law, growers and processors are an allowed use in the HC district. And that was done specifically because there are some larger warehouse type buildings that exist in the HC district currently that could be converted into a grower processor type building. Those buildings are too large to simply be a retail store. And so the business owners, the building owners, have approached the city and have indicated their desire to grow and process out of that building. But as I indicated before, growing and processing is largely, to my eyes, an industrial use of property, not a commercial or retail use of property. And so I am just a little hesitant to strongly be in favor of it. You know, I think it will provide a certain amount of renaissance for some of these buildings that maybe are being underutilized or are not doing as well as maybe they should be or they'd like to be doing. And again, there are some ways we can maybe blunt the point. Sorry for the pun. That we would say, okay, well, yes, growers and processors would be allowed, but we would require you to be a retail store also. That way it remains a commercial property. And we can also maybe say you can only put a grower processor in a building that's smaller than 40,000 feet, which would, I think, to Mr. Conley's point of view, would prevent these Walmart-sized buildings from being created on the HC district.
Okay. Questions, comments on that one?
Only one more point, and that is that, so currently under the current draft, we would allow growers and processors in the HC district. But if this board were to recommend that we exclude them by a yes vote on this question, they would still be permitted in the industrial section of town, which would be this southwest corner of the city by 16 Mile and White Creek Avenue. The industrial section of town downtown would be prohibited. And if you vote to exclude the HC district, growers and processors would only be allowed in this section of town. Now, I believe Mr. Owens did previously indicate, or maybe it was Mr. Conley, this is all part of the 425 agreement area. And so it is theoretically possible that a person could seek to add some of these properties on White Creek South into the industrial zone and then grow process down this way. That's for a later date. Mr. Hall indicated he'd like to speak.
Yes, Mr. Hall. Nope, he's muted. Hold on one second here.
I would like to see a minimum number of plants and a maximum square footage to allow a grower and processor in the HC. I like Mr. Conley. I don't want to see someone come in and take over Tractor Supply or Farm and Home. It can monopolize on the whole block out there. So that's my piece.
Mr. Hall, if I could, what do you mean by minimum number of plants?
Restrict the number of plants up to 500 or less, or 400 or less. Not sure.
Yep, so I don't have the information in front of me, but I believe the grow operations have 3 separate licenses. I believe one, the smallest one, is 500 plants. The next one up, I believe, is 1,000 plants, and then the largest would be 2,000 plants. But under the way the law is currently drafted, we would allow people to stack licenses, meaning that they could have 5 of the 2,000 plant grower licenses in one location. So that theoretically could be 10,000 plants in one location. Now, the limiting factor, which is being proposed, is that you could only have a 40,000 square foot building. Now, I don't grow marijuana, so I don't know how many plants you can fit into a 40,000 square foot location. That's a capitalism question. So I don't know how excluding or putting a limit on the number of plants makes sense, but
Square footage maybe would be a better way to control it. I just don't want one huge store like a Walmart, like Mr. Conley stated, to come in and take up the whole 425 block.
oh, I entirely agree, and that's why that's part of question 13.
And turn it into an industrial operation to basically sell its proceeds to other shops who want to mainly for our local area, I guess.
Well, and then so to address Mr. Hall's point, I was going to add a question 14, which I think might help address that concern. And I guess we'll address it at number 14.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments on this one? Harrison, I thought you had your hand up earlier.
I did. I was just going to comment on sort of forcing them to have a retail location as well, but it sounds like Mr. Womack wants to cover that in question 14, so I'll just hold that off for now.
Okay. All right, so question number 11, we're asking, should the city exclude growers and processors from the HC district? Mr. Bray,
Yes.
Mr. Conley,
No.
Mr. Hall,
No,
Mr. McGrath,
Yes.
Harrison?
Nope.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Mr. Owens votes yes. So, Mr. Womack, I had 4-3 on that one, and question number 12 was conditional, I believe, on 11.
While it is conditional, of course, this board is not making the final determination, it is making the recommendation at their June meeting. I think the city council would benefit from votes and discussion on all of the questions. And I don't want to simply stop asking a question because, of course, that board may feel otherwise, and I think they would benefit from a discussion and votes on these additional questions should they decide to go contrary to what the Planning Commission's recommendation was on number 11.
Okay. So, if we allow the growers and processors in the HC district, then the question is, should we require that they also have a retail storefront co-located at the same spot?
Yes.
So that's the question, if.
I think that not requiring it would be out of character with the current highway commercial. We don't have warehouses there right now or buildings that aren't in some way accessible to the public. I think by just having a building there that's going to be closed off wouldn't really fit the character of what we have there right now.
As a counterpoint, I don't mean to cut you off if you start talking. If we were to require them to have a retailer portion of their warehouse there, and we would basically be defeating the purpose of, for those of us who are voting to keep retailers downtown, that would basically be defeating that purpose, because if we allowed it there, then why would we vote to not allow retailers there by themselves at all, honestly?
Right. I would argue against that, though, that if we're just going to, this is conditional on if we're going to allow them in this district. If we're not going to allow them, then, then we're just going to say, grow operations will just have to be in the industrial district. But I feel like if we are going to allow them in highway commercial, then I think that we should have to also have them have a retail storefront, because then again, we're just creating a warehouse district in an area where we don't currently have one.
I know these questions are complex, but I just wanted to add in. So this question is saying, if we allow growing and processing, as Mr. Harrison Owens pointed out, which is an industrial use, if we then further require that a retail store must co-locate with a grower processor, you're saying exactly that we don't want this to be a warehouse district. We don't want this to be an industrial district. You must also sell to keep it a retail commercial store. Now, of course, we know that the growers and processors are going to be going on, but as far as the public is concerned, it's the retail store aspect of that property that they would be interacting with. Now, the difference between this and question 14, which I'm going to add, is that under question 14, what I'm going to say or propose is that we would prohibit a retail store operating as a standalone business in the HC district. That way, if you wanted to run a retail store as a standalone, you would be forced to go into the B2 or B3 district unless you were also opening a processor and grower.
It's complex.
Any other questions or comments on that?
I understand the question. I just don't like the concept of having a processor grower out in HC. And then once we do, if we allowed the retailer, then as Ashley mentioned, it defeats the whole purpose of forcing it downtown. So I don't agree with it at all.
Okay. Any other thoughts before we vote? Okay. So if we allow grower processors in the HC district, should we require that they have a retail storefront co-location there? Mr. Bray,
No.
Mr. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yeah,
Mr. McGrath,
Yes.
Mr. Harrison Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Owens votes yes. Okay, question 13. If we allow grower processors to operate in the HC district, should we require the building be less than 40,000 square feet?
So this, I think, might help address Mr. Hall's concerns from prior. And that is, we do not want this to become a district of Walmart-sized, Costco-sized marijuana businesses. And so we could change that number to any number we want. Now, of course, there are some buildings out there that they may want to convert to a marijuana business, and I believe that those are all under the 40,000 square foot size. And there are some businesses out there that I think we would not want to see change to a marijuana business, and I believe those are all over the 40,000 square foot size. But of course, this is something that the planning commission members can talk amongst themselves whether that number is appropriate, and they can make a recommendation of a different size if they would like. But that, I guess, maybe should be part of your discussion, and I guess a motion to change the question. I don't know how the chair wants to address this. It's a kind of a complex question in itself.
Right.
But I think that 40,000 square foot is appropriate, and that's the reason I recommended that number.
If I go ahead.
if we set with the 40,000 square feet and it doesn't fit with the building, the occupant or the owner has the right to go to the ZBA to request a variance from our 40,000. So there's our out.
Ashley?
I just wish I had a better visual of 40,000 square feet because I honestly don't know how big that is, and a representation would be kind of nice to help me make this decision better, I guess.
If you give me a couple minutes, I can try to bring up just an idea of what it might look like. So just keep discussing it and I'll try to bring up a map, okay?
All right, thank you.
80 by 50, 40 by 100. No, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. Don't listen to me.
40,000 square feet is pretty good size. I work in warehousing, so it's a pretty decent size area. They can have a heck of a lot of plants in 40,000 square feet.
That's
Yeah.
a nice feature.
It
No, you
sounds big. I just don't want to make any assumptions, you know.
Well, I would say the Meyer store is probably about 180,000 square feet, thereabouts. So I think it's about 4 of those.
Yeah, I think that 40,000 square feet seems to be a decent size to where it's not going to be overly large, but would still allow them to, conduct the operations that they're looking to do.
Oh, that's only 15,000. Okay.
What building is that?
Save a lot. Is that no?
I'm sorry, I was
That's not
muted.
Save Lot.
This is the Save Lot building and it is approximately 14,000 square feet.
That's not the
That's
same
actually the
building.
medical center.
Yeah,
Save
that's the
Lot is
doctor's
just to
building.
the
Is
north
it?
of
Yeah,
that.
that's the
Oh.
doctor's building.
My apologies.
Don't
Okay.
listen to him.
Also, I guess we're not growing marijuana at the medical facility. So let me do the Save Lot building real.
They'll be so disappointed.
It's a neat tool.
And so there's a Save Lot building at approximately 18,000 square feet.
All right.
40,000 feet,
40,000.
kind of big.
Yeah,
Yeah.
40,000 would be 2 Save-A-Lots.
How big is the fireworks building? I'm curious. Because that's kind of a big warehousey building. Oh, yeah, that's not.
That's yeah.
That's a little smaller.
Wow.
So this is
Yeah.
the fireworks store, approximately 6,200 square feet.
Yeah, 40,000 is
It's a decent
big.
size. What building is this, by the way? I'm not really familiar with this building.
There you go.
So this is a warehouse building directly across the street from the fireworks building, and I believe it is used for warehousing by CS Manufacturing.
All right.
I have no indication that they would try to convert it or use it. This is simply for educational purposes for the planning commission to understand size and scale.
Well, yeah, it helps that there are vehicles next to it because it really gives me a better idea of size-wise.
So you see 34,000 there. I will do the Tractor Supply and Family Farm and Home, and so you guys can see those.
So under the way that this is drafted, would we be saying that the 40,000 square feet would be including the retail location as well as the grow operation would all have to be within the 40,000 square feet?
Yes and no. So for those of us who did go out to the Muskegon store on our little field trip, you saw that they had the retail store and what they proposed for a grow operation in the back, and that was all located within one building. Now, under the state of Michigan rules, they have to be separated by what's called a dead man's door, which is basically a room where only one door can be open at any point, so that you have to close all doors to open one door. And that seems to work for them, meaning that they can do the growing and processing in the back half, and they can do the retail in the front half. Now, that is theoretically possible for the planning commission to say, okay, if you want to grow and process in this 39,000 square foot building, and then you would have to propose a site plan for the addition of a new building on the same piece of property. And so here's a good example, actually. So this is the Tractor Supply Company at 46,000 square feet. You see, I did not include this building. This is a separate building, but it's on the same piece of property. And there has been discussion of adding yet another building here. And then also discussion on putting another building here, which I guess would span on 2 separate properties. But as I understand this, and of course, the planning commission can give me thoughts and recommendations about how to change the language. But what we're simply saying is that for any one building, a grower processor cannot exceed 40,000 square feet. Now, if somebody wanted to propose having 12 40,000 square foot buildings on one property, they'd have to get site plan approval for that.
Would it maybe be possible to change the language so that it was that the entire business had to be contained within 40,000 square feet, then thus eliminating kind of that loophole of having, you know, a large building and then having another building set up that was, you know, just the retail, kind of circumventing that.
And so there's the family farm and home at about 61,000 square feet. Yeah, I mean, I have no problems trying to draft some language that would do that. That would all have to be contained within one structure, one building. Because as I indicated before, over in Muskegon, they do have one building, which is now being converted into the 3 separate uses, the growing, the processing, and the retail, all under one roof. I have no problems with trying to draft that language.
I like that idea. Because like Harrison says, it kind of cuts away the loophole.
Mr. Harrison Owens, would you like to attempt to, I guess, motion to change that language? Would you like me to propose language and then you can make a motion to change that question? Chair, do you have an opinion how to go about doing this?
No, I think that we can just, you know, some of the other ones I think we've kind of clarified the question so that our vote was more intelligent. So I don't know that we need to have a motion and a support to change these questions. I think we're just trying to something that we make sure that we're clear on.
So how about this, to make it simple? Well, I guess we could do this citywide, but I don't know if the planning commission would want to impose this on the industrial district.
No.
You could change it
No.
to all marijuana businesses have to be contained within a building of less than 40,000 square feet, or all marijuana businesses in the HC district have to be located within a building of less than 40,000 square feet. Not simply growers and processors, but changing it to all marijuana businesses.
I would want to limit this to just the HC district. I don't think that we need to put these kind of restrictions on the industrial area.
I agree. And it wouldn't really matter downtown because I don't think there's any buildings in the B3 or B2 district that really even come close to that size.
Of course not. Right. All right, so we're going to say if we allow growers process to operate in the HC district, should we require that all of their operations be in a building less than 40,000 square feet?
And I would only ask whether any board member has a recommendation for a different number. As I indicated before, I simply chose 40 as a good number based on my knowledge from zoning administration, which I thought would be an appropriate size. But now that the board has kind of seen a visualization of what some of these different buildings look like and how big they are, do they have another proposed number in mind?
20 sounds big enough to me. 40,000 is a big building. As you can see, Tractor Supply is 46,000. So basically that's the size of a of what is being proposed at the moment. That's a big building to have plans.
I agree. 20,000 seems fair. It's about it's a little bit bigger than Save a Lot was, and that seems decent enough for what they're looking for, in my opinion.
They want something bigger, they can go to the IC or industrial.
All right, so we'll make the question go like this then, if I got this right. Yes or no? If we allow growers, processors to operate in the HC district, should we require that their entire business operate in a building less than 20,000 square feet? Does that capture the essence of the question correctly?
I think so.
Okay. So any other thoughts on that before we vote?
Just a slight sort of maybe tweak to the wording.
Yep.
I feel like maybe we should include something so that maybe the total area of maybe all of the buildings has to fit that. Like I'm envisioning if they possibly wanted to have the retail have some kind of a building that was separated in some way by like a walkway or something, if they didn't want the buildings to be directly connected. You know, if there was any kind of security concerns or things like that.
Mr. Harrison Owens, are you proposing then that perhaps 20,000 square feet floor space for all buildings on the same property related to marijuana businesses?
Correct, yes.
Mr. Chair, would you like to propose that as a change?
Yes, I like that. So, okay, so how about we require their entire marijuana business operate in buildings less than 20,000 square feet. Does that work?
On an entire property?
Yeah, on a single piece of property. Is that? Harrison, is that in line with what you were thinking?
Yes, that works for me.
Okay. Okay. If we allow growers processors to operate in the HC district, should we require that their entire marijuana business operate in buildings less than 20,000 square feet on a single piece of property? Okay. Mr. Bray,
Yes.
Mr. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. McGrath,
Yes.
Mr. Harrison Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Owens votes yes. All right. So, Mr. Womack, you had a question for number 14, which kind of stemmed off of number 9. If we have retail stores in the HC district, they cannot be standalone stores. Is that the wording?
Yeah, I guess I didn't have exact wording in mind, so give me a second.
Okay.
How about that we would prohibit a standalone retailer, marijuana retailer, to operate in the HC district. And of course, the unspoken part of that, which the board has already discussed and recognized, is that if we're going to allow and require a retailer to co-locate with a grower processor, that would be the only way you could have a retailer in the HC district. So the question would be, would we prohibit standalone retailer stores in the HC district?
Okay. So the yes or no part would be, should we prohibit a standalone retailer to operate in the HC district? Right? If we're all right. Do we have, I know we've kind of discussed this already, but is there any further discussion on this one or questions?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Should we prohibit should we prohibit a standalone retailer to operate in the HC district? Mr. Bray,
Yes.
Mr. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yeah.
Mr. McGrath,
Yes.
Harrison Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Mr. Owens votes yes as well. All right. Any other proposed changes that we'd put this under the number 14 here?
So I put this in the agenda for any planning commission member who might have come up with a separate proposal. apart from the one that was already brought up by a board member, which I just asked.
The only thing I don't know where else to just point this out, but I noticed a couple places in the draft zoning language. I saw some places where the word must was used, and I think that a lot of our other drafting language, just for consistency, I think says shall. So just that was just like a consistency issue, but.
So I did address that question with the city attorney specifically regarding this, and I was told that the preferred language under drafting ordinances is must and not
Okay.
shall. So I will defer to the city attorney on this one.
Sure, okay. I just saw shall in most of our other stuff, so. All right. All right, good job, guys. We do not have anything under old business. We have some correspondence items, just kind of keep you up to speed on some things that we have already, well, the O'Reillys we've already talked about. Mr. Womack, real quickly, you want to just talk about that that adult home? Because I don't think we really discussed that in a planning commission meeting, just so the commissioners are aware of what's happening over there.
Yeah, so and I think the only reason I put this on your agenda was a gentle reminder that things that we do with the planning commission do kind of extend into the future indefinitely. Now there is in favor, I think, at the state level to allow these types of adult foster care group homes to exist in residential districts. Under our zoning, though, a 12-person facility is a special land use. Now, back in 2015, you know, in the BM period, the before Mike period, the Planning Commission did approve a special land use for this use at that address. So my hands were tied, and of course this Planning Commission's hands were tied, and did not have the opportunity to review it because under planning and zoning law, special land uses do run with the land. And so what we essentially had was one group home operator, I don't want to say going out of business, but closing up operations. And then that this new group home operator wanted to put the same use in that property. And so I felt, based on my reading of the law, that I didn't have any way to say no to that. And other than some cursory review about parking and things like that, I didn't have a way to say no. So I want the Planning Commission to be aware that that had occurred, and to keep that in mind when we do these special land uses, that what we are essentially saying is for now until the end of time, you do have the ability to do it. Whether it's somebody we like now, it could be somebody we dislike later. Not indicating that one way or the other regarding this situation, but only that the use is what matters and not the person proposing it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Womack, any other comments that you'd like to share?
No, I would like to thank the Planning Commission. I know this was a very difficult and complex meeting. And of course, you guys, I don't want to say always surprise me, but you always fulfill the belief that I have in you guys to act as mature adults who kind of guide the planning and zoning of the city. I do brag about you guys on a regular occasion because I see how maybe some other planning commissions in other communities work. And they don't have, I believe, what I would call mature decision making, which is what this board has been accomplishing for the last several years. So thank you for both that and also for the decisions, the difficult and complex decisions you guys made tonight.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Johnson, do you have anything for us?
Not at this time.
Okay. Planning Commission members, any comments from you?
I'd just like to kind of thank everyone for being really much, like Mr. Womack said, mature and allowing everyone to have a chance to speak. I wasn't sure going into this how it was going to be, but I kind of like that we all took our time and let each other speak individually like we would during a normal board meeting. It made it go really smoothly, in my opinion.
Mr. Harrison.
I'd just like to say a thank you for Mr. Womack that this is obviously not a typical meeting. Doing it over the Zoom call was a little bit more difficult, but he did a great job of getting us all of the information we needed to make this go really smoothly. So I really appreciate that.
And I'd like to also add my thanks to all of you because this is thankless work, because all of us get paid the big bucks to be here to do this. But it really is important, and your very thoughtful deliberations tonight speak volumes about your level of care and concern for our city. So thank you for taking the time to think these through and to weigh in on the things tonight. It's very, very important for us to do this. So, Mr. Hall, as the city council representative, any updates you'd like to pass along to us?
I would like to thank all the planning commission members for their due diligence on all this homework on this marijuana ordinance. Basically we're laying the foundation for the future businesses in Cedar, whether we like them or not. We need to look at this stuff, and we all have looked at it very closely. We've went over it for the last year, so we're finally coming to an end, and we need to fine tune this thing to make it fit our community, not the state. So I thank one and all of you for all your hard work.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Johnson is not here, so we don't have a report for our planning consultant. So that being said, is there a motion for us to adjourn?
I will make that motion.
Okay, is there support for that?
Second.
All in favor of adjournment? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.
See all you later. There it is.